This is one of her collections of poetry. This is Tilt Hover Veer. Mary lives in the lower Hudson Valley. Her publications include poems, essays, shades of melancholy, appears in Melancholia, Hinge, as Imlet Lima by Will Alexander Heller Levinson, and Mary Newell. Dr. Newell, M.A. Columbia, B.A. Berkeley, received a doctorate from Fordham University in American Literature and the Environment. She has taught literature writing at college level. She is also a splendiferous human being, and that to me is most valuable. Mary, would you grace us?
That's great. So I'm mostly going to read from
Into the microphone.
talking to the microphone. Is that better?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
This is
I'm
what you're
mostly going to read from my chapbook, but I'm going to read a couple of other poems first. And the first one is called Bank Tangle. It's a Hudson River poem. I want to just start with an aside about Bank Tangle, what it means, because I don't think it's commonly known. It's actually a phrase from Charles Darwin, and it's his way of explaining how different species are interconnected. So it's just one sentence from Darwin. It is interesting to contemplate a tangled bank, clothed with many plants of many kinds, with birds singing in the bushes, with various insects flitting about, and with worms crawling through the damp earth, and to reflect that these elaborately constructed forms, so different from each other and dependent upon one another in so complex a manner, have all been produced by laws acting around us. Anyway, that's the idea of bank tangles, currently called interdependency ecologically. Sorry, but here's the poem. Bank Tangle. Train stop anomaly. Twig nest tucked into branch tangle. River scan, plummet, breed. Across the Hudson, homes tucked into bank slope. Survey, embark, dwell. Settled in for the duration. 19 miles downstream, smoke rises from Indian Point. As the river ambles north, histories wheeze in eddies, palimpsest laden with feuds. That's this next poem, which is rather long, is about my own personal origins, and I think of it as very kind of quietly political because I'm personally interested in, became interested at a certain age in my family history, but also I think there's something about tracing one's origins back to when one was an immigrant by extension that sort of connects us to the current situation for all Americans. So this is my familial immigrant story, in not very much detail, but anyway. To the women who dealt me in. And just in case you missed that in your education, NOLA is an abbreviation for New Orleans, which happens to be where I was born. When I was 7, we visited the great aunts, dry, powdery faces and stuffy rooms. Oblivious of family history, I puzzled why they fussed so much about me. 3 unmarried schoolmarms, 1 a principal, shaped independent lives. They shared a house on Plum Street, somewhat outside the Garden District. Their brothers I never met. Grandfather in the photo, suited up in natural linen, on a sultry NOLA stoop. His reckless twin, I heard, ignored the debts he couldn't pay. Their Irish father, Thomas Jefferson Hanley, the hopeful name given by starving parents, married a Catherine he met on the crossing, and here were their daughters on Plum Street. My mother stayed with her aunts during college and relished meals with courses and flourishes, all tasty. The cook made crab soup on Fridays before leaving early, toting leftovers on the ferry. When my father shipped off to war, Mother crossed the country to give birth in NOLA. Her aunt's pantry became my first nursery. Soon we bounced to Seattle, to Norfolk. Shuffling these wisps of memory, I savor a whiff of she-crab soup. I honor a birthplace only known in snippets, the hand I was dealt, and the women who opened their home to rowdy new life, doting, and dealt me into their game, my debt to recover their trace. So now for the chapbook. This is a small book, but it has a lot of organizational principles, so bear with me. First of all, it's divided into 3 sections, which have titles and little epithets. The first one being tilt. And I think of this as sort of what the planet is doing and what we humans are doing, and the third one being kind of what we could be doing sometimes. Tilt. Earth wobble shuffles the seasons. So that's the tilt section. The veer section, which is kind of what I imagine humans are doing most of the time. Aim for the pole star, wake up awry. There is, I have to say there is a counter veer, but that's because I'm an optimist, so I'll save that one for last. Hover. The hover section, I think, is interesting for me. Anyway, the epithet is an oscillative poise, a steady eye. So hover to me is kind of the possibility of floating and not sinking in some kind of way, attentiveness to your life. I'm going to start with a veer. We'll work up to the optimistic version. So this actually comes from a quote in a book, which supposedly is based on fact, and I'm sorry if this is unfortunate news to you, but here it goes. Among the majority of people, the full blindfolded deviation circle is formed in about half an hour. Basically what that means is if your friends take you out in the wilderness and blindfold you and leave you there, if you're like everyone, which of course none of us would ever admit to being, but if you were like everyone, it would take you about half an hour to end up back where you started. So that's the fact, and here's the poem. In the pith of veer, the perfect circle, completion, unity, where, outside geometry, Earth's axis marks an oval, tilts and wobbles. Blindfolded, most circle back to where they started. The tilt from a slightly longer leg creates a swerve, nudges toward a circle in roughly half an hour. On the verge of getting somewhere, that slight deflection, a moment's inattention, a stray remark, a bright distraction, a veer, to end up here, back where we know the ropes that hold us. Can circle morph into spiral in time, in time? That's veer. Let's go on to hover. So I'll just pause for a minute to tell you the other organizing principle of the book. All the poems begin or have somewhere embedded in them the phrase "in the pith of." And this is sort of in keeping with my partner Heller Levinson's hinge theory, which works with particles like that. It's really an idea of investigating language and different shades of it, and much more could be said about it, but we're not going to be here all night. I picked the word pith because it has, to me, really a lot of interesting levels of meaning. The pith of a plant, I mean, there are green plants and trees, but generally speaking, the pith is the center. So you think of the center as being an axis, like the spine that holds you up. But actually the pith is hollow, partly, and partly spongy. And because of that, it's the part that carries the nutrition up and down the stem. So it by being empty, so to speak, it feeds the plant. So it has that funny combination, paradoxically, of being the gist of something, the heart, if you like, and also being empty or available. And this particular poem is in the pith of hover. When we stand still, our head's weight tilts us forward. Momentum prompts movement to resist falling. Wing flaps let some birds hover, a strenuous mid-air suspension. Kestrel matches wind speed head-on, poised in transparency to foresee. Osprey hangs still to focus on foraging. Hummingbird parades his ball and socket shoulder joint, his wing lift on upbeats as well as down, skates figure eights before the trumpet flower's throat, sits deep, flashes luminescence, wheels away. We are left staring at vacancy, sensing wake turbulence, vortex from activated wings. Sometimes we wait alert, thirsty for an intimation, an evanescent summons. And this next one is called In the Pit of Attenuation, which means stretching something to the point of breaking. How many of you know about murmuration? What murmuration is?
Starlings.
Starlings. Does anybody not know and want to know?
No.
Well, it's a really cool thing. You can actually, if you can't see it in real life, you can probably find it on TV, which occasionally is useful videos for showing you things that would be otherwise hard to see, like osprey nests and things like that. Murmuration is a self-organizing phenomena that starlings and other birds, mostly birds that catch insects, partake of, sometimes on a daily basis. And so you'll actually watch this for about an hour in Oregon. I particularly went to see this happen because I'd never seen it before. The birds will all be flying around. Each one will be chasing bugs and minding their own occupation. And that'll go on for a while. And then they sort of hover around together and they begin to form this little cloud. And all of a sudden, as the sun is gradually going down, they start to form a vortex. And they gradually create this beautiful shape, and they all go into something, a cave. And in this case, it was a chimney. What they've chosen as where they're going to spend the night safely. But it is beautiful to watch. Anyway, a long explanation for a short poem, which ends with that word. In the pith of attenuation, excruciate at the crossroads, chiasmic tangle, climacteric muddle, Janus pole, crosswires, wrap warp, heed elusive, scale nuance, interval trill, attune, consonants throb, murmuration. And now I'm going to read another Hudson River poem, which is a favorite poem of somebody here, and one of my favorites too. I got really interested in the laws of movement, so to speak, watching things that move, because at least the way my mind was trained was kind of in these fixed categories and so on. And so I really wanted to fluidify my thinking and ways of taking in information. And so I studied wakes, among other things. Wakes are really interesting. You know, birds make wakes, and so do ducks. And the interesting thing is that they're the same mathematically. I'm not a mathematician, I promise. But, you know, I just like cool facts like that. So this is sort of the mixing of different patterns in the Hudson River. Intersection witness. Say the wakes of a sailboat and a plump of mallards intersect. Many V's flange out behind their gliding. Plankton, pushed to the V arms, roll over with turbulence, spuming, while in between the water is slick. The wakes run interference on the tide, deforming waves that lap the shore. Say, someone standing on shore tries to unravel that rippling skein, tracing backwards from the waves, while her rapt companion sways to the undulations as the laps refresh her feet. In the pith of intersecting wakes, say, life is complex, perplexing, has beauty, has pattern, has meaning embedded within that tangle or in its witnessing. There has to be one for the butterflies. I'm a big fan of butterflies. And in fact, right now I have no parsley to eat because my parsley is being eaten by the caterpillars of a certain form of butterfly, and they're gorgeous caterpillars, and I don't know what I'm going to do for parsley, but it's really worth it because they're prettier even if they're not as tasty. But anyway, in the pith of diapause. So diapause is, sorry for all these words, but I get interested in words. Diapause is a sort of delay if a caterpillar, well, actually a cocoon, if the weather is not good, butterflies will probably not emerge because they can only fly in 55-degree weather or something like that. So diapause is a sort of temporary delay until the weather or other conditions improve. And this is my attempt to understand what that might feel like. In the pith of diapause, tone held through the gap between crawl chew and flutter sip, weather churn, on the brink, wings rolled ready, colors soft through chrysalis wrap, slow unfurl, finding the updraft. And two more I think I'm going to read. Here we are. This is called In the Pit of Swerve. The new sidles in between the hinges, knows your name, recites arcane instructions, dissolves into mist when you ask for clarity. The swerve astounds you with its flare, but means to unseat you, hiding within your sight, peeping through barricades, seeking only to bloom. And finally, which is short, I have to read, the counterveer section. I'm just going to read the epithet. This is cheating. This is optimist form of cheating. You know, you have three things and then you have to add one to make it come out right. Counterveer. Amid fluctuations, an axis affirmed. But this poem actually is right before that. In the pith of Hallow, amid the ravaging, the hollow of loss, uncrate what you held sacred, cherish the gleanings. Thank you. In the pith of Luscious.
There we go. You see? I knew it.
This is what you're waiting for, huh? Well, you asked for it. In the pith of Luscious, tongue roll, silk swirl, frothy shoals, tadpole twists, pearl retrieval, luxuriate in peaches.
That's it.